Hello, everyone. I am Stephen Drew from the Architecture Social, and I am here with the fantastic Will Ridgway from McDonald and Company. And
Hello.
I'm also hello, and I'm also here with Tara Cull from Archie English. How
Hello,
is everyone? Are we all right?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I've got a new microphone set up, so if I sound a bit like funky, let me know. But hopefully, it should sound more professional.
Sounds
When I
very
speak
good.
Yeah.
When I speak slow, you know that I'm sincere. Oh, it helps if I turn my mobile off, isn't it? Just turn that off because we're live. Well, what a busy week. What a busy week. So I should probably, I've done one or two things online. I wouldn't mind just clearing the air a little bit. Oh, good. Oh, fantastic. So I have left McDonald and Company on good terms. Absolutely fantastic place to work. And I have joined ArchAdemia, where I am their head of talent. Woohoo. So, oh my gosh, I haven't got a noise to celebrate that, but here we go. Here we go. Oh, I'm sure I can get something. So, yeah, we go. Got to ArchAdemia, which is a bit of fun. So we're currently looking for a few roles, and we'll talk about that later. But as well as that, I now do coaching and mentoring. So I've done mentoring before, but I do coaching. So I've been following Tara, and that's what I've been up to. But what we're here to do now is we're here to talk about a very interesting topic about when you leave your role. This is a very stressful thing. You get your job offer, amazing. You accept the job offer. Woohoo! And you go, oh no, I've got to tell my current employer, and that's
The
extremely
worst.
difficult. Yeah, it's not ideal at all. So, on that basis, to help us talk about this question, we have Will Ridgway. Will, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, McDonald Company, and how you've seen people hand their notice in, and then we'll jump into it later.
Yeah, absolutely. So I sit on the architecture team at McDonald and Company, and recruit for various architecture practices. And I think a lot of people ask us about, how do I do the best CV? How do I approach the right? How do I approach studios? How do I find a job? And they always forget about how do you hang your notice in. It's very important because it's actually probably one of the most trickier bits, because generally, you're doing it by yourself. You don't have the help from a recruiter or someone else or a friend. You have to do it for yourself. And it's one of the most important skills to have, because it ultimately can affect your long-term future. Even if you don't think it will, it's a big impact. So it's very important to make sure you do it right. And a lot of people neglect it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Will, and we'll touch upon that in a bit. But basically, it's really important to be professional about it, and you want to keep that relationship because you never know what's going to happen in the future, and you want to kind of because handing you notice in it can feel quite emotive. You've worked at somewhere, you get along with them, you care with them. I mean, I was at McDonald Company for 4 years. It's a very difficult conversation to have, but we will talk about how we center it and how to be professional about it and how to move on in the best way. So Tara, it's really good that you're joining us here as well. And while you're not from a recruitment background, I'm sure you've had a few jobs yourself, and due to what you do, I'm sure you see people in this circumstance as well. So for anyone that's not familiar with you, Tara, do you want to let everyone know what Archie English is about?
Sure. So I coach architects and landscape architects, people within the built environment who speak English as a second language. So yeah, as Will was saying, I help people with finding jobs, preparing for job searches or interviews, but it's exactly the same. They neglect the idea of having to leave the current job as well. And that's just as challenging sometimes as looking for the job, because as you say, you don't want to ruin your reputation. And I think some people find like they don't want to do that. They don't want to feel like they're burning bridges. So, and it's also something that I've had to do myself as well, having worked as a landscape architect, and making sure that you maintain those relationships with people is really, really important. So that is what I do. And yeah, looking forward to this conversation. I think it's a really important one.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, me and Will have been thinking about doing this one for a while, so we finally got round to it, Will, because you're right. It's the part of the process that I think we think about it, but then we think, oh, don't worry about that now. I'll worry about it later. And when the event comes, it's like, how do you go about handing in your notice? It's extremely, for me, from personal experience, when I've had to do it. So I've done it, I think, twice in my career now, and both times I was nervous, building myself up for it. because it's a very difficult conversation, because these are people that you've been working with for a long period of time. Maybe if you're in the scenario where you've had an awful work experience, you're just like, hey, I'm ready to go. Here's my notice. See you later. And maybe in that way, I think it's still a few of the things that we talk about can apply here, because what you do need to do is whatever happens, you need to leave on a professional note. You gotta have the upper hand. If things have gone badly during your professional career, you need to be the bigger man, the bigger lady. You need to be the person that can let things go and not bring emotion into it, and kind of leave on good terms. So I know, Will, you've got your cheeky resignation letter from McDonald Company, which we can showcase, which is awesome, and that would be great, Will. But let's freestyle a little bit just beforehand. So the important thing, I think, is when you've got a job offer, you're going to say to them, you can start on a certain date. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to acknowledge that we have to have that conversation sooner than later. When you hand in your resignation, this is not something you can leave to the last minute. You are contractually bound. So probably the first tip, guys, isn't it, I think, is that you have to look at your contract so you know what your notice period is. And you have to not overpromise to the employer that you're going to of a date that you can't achieve. And it's probably best, unless due to COVID or something else, that you meet in person to have this conversation with your line manager. Or if worst case, you basically you do a Zoom meeting. But I think it should be a human conversation, shouldn't it? Hey, Paul, don't worry about the Zoom meeting. We can have our chat later. But right now I'm on the live, so we will talk. We will talk. Don't worry. I can't jack the live, but I love Paul. It's amazing. So Paul is Vice President of Manchester Society of Architects. Really great. Check out Paul. But so jumping back to it. So first thing is get the date, in my opinion. Then I would say rather you could send an email and just ping it off to your line manager. I personally think that's a little bit rude, or it could be misconceived as rude, even if your intentions are good and formal. I think it is always better to ask for a time to sit down with your line manager. You don't need to, and Paul, you don't need to apologize. What I was going to say is with this is that when you don't need to say before the meeting going into it that, hey, Will, I want to resign. So can we have 10 minutes to talk? I think you just say, look, I have something really important I have to tell you. Can we have 5 minutes on the phone? That's the worst case. Or 5 minutes on a Zoom, or ideally, can we go to a meeting room for 5 to 10 minutes? But what do you guys think at first? Do you think that's the best first step? Will, I'll just jump to you quickly. I mean, do you think it's better in person to have this conversation rather than on an email at like 6 o'clock at night on a Friday, like, bye?
I agree. It's important to have the conversation in person and then follow it up with an email as like official. I mean, if you're really keen on making sure you leave in the best possible ways possible, it's important to be there in person, ideally, and what you said, either video call or over the phone at worst case scenario. But I think maybe just before that, you've also got to think about your approach and what you're going to say in the face-to-face to them, because in that moment, when you're talking to them face-to-face, at first they might, it's not going to be necessarily well received. It's going to be very surprising if the your employer's like yeah, that's fine, amazing, off you go. They're going to be almost shocked, and they're going to probe and ask questions. And it's important to make sure that you know which questions to answer, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to give too much away that can potentially appear negatively on you. You don't want to necessarily talk about the problems that the company are having necessarily, because again, that could come off bad. So it's important to just think about what you're going to say and think carefully of how you would respond to such questions that could potentially be asked to you, because you want to make sure that you have a plan so you don't get caught off guard in the face-to-face meeting. So think about what you're going to say first of all, and then of course go into the meeting and then explain there and there of when you'll be leaving, what you can do to help you leave in a smooth fashion. So whether, you know, how you would do the handover, and just basically be as upfront as possible to make sure it's a smooth transition, and professional, of course. You know, you don't want to get pulled in with emotions. It's important to make sure you remain professional and clear-headed throughout it, even if your employer is trying to, you know, put up a fight, for example.
Ooh, yeah, makes complete sense. I've got my sound effects ready now. So is this like, is that the emotion going into the meeting, panicking? I think you've hit the nail on the head, Will. I think it's important to remove emotion, and this is probably not the time to be like, I'm leaving because Tara, you said this and this and that, and I didn't appreciate that. And when I signed up, this was not on my job description. It's much better to, in my opinion, just you might feel that way, and you can touch upon things slightly, but you want to say, I think the best thing is to go, Tara, can we have a little talk? Tara, I've got to be really upfront with you because it's important to let you know that I have been for other interviews because I have been exploring another role, or I had this role approach me. Okay. And so I went to this opportunity, and after speaking to this other company, I've realized that this is something I feel passionate about, and this is something I have to pursue. And after thinking about it a lot, I really value what is here. I just would regret what would happen if I didn't take this opportunity. So unfortunately, on that basis, I have to hand in my notice, and my notice is 1 month. I appreciate it's not ideal scenario. I wanted to let you know as soon as possible so that we can together make sure the arrangements are in place for me leaving. And of course, I know it's not ideal, so I'm happy to work a little bit extra hard during the time in between so that hopefully we can end on a good note. But speaking up front, I have enjoyed a lot of what we've done here. I really do value what you've done, and I want to be a good leaver. And part of that is, again, you know, helping out during this difficult period, making it easy for you as well, and keeping that relationship, because I'd like to stay in touch in the future. Oh, I thought I did all right there, didn't I?
Yeah,
maybe it's because I've got like flashbacks.
It's fresh.
Last month. Yeah, it's fresh. But obviously, you say that though, and for anyone listening, and Tara, I'll get your thoughts on this in a second. But this is like us talking now. It's never going to be as perfect in real life, but that's important, and we're all human beings. And like Will said, an employee could be like, as I've seen it always, of like, you know, okay, I understand. That's a shame, but do you know what? We understand. We support you leaving. Or we've seen, Will, haven't we? People who give they notice it, and then sometimes the employers are like, "What? You can't go. What can we do?" And okay, you can enter that conversation as well. Or, you know, sometimes it's a mutual thing that they're like, "Okay, I understand. We support it. Okay, go." You know, that kind of thing. So it really can be different, and I think that's the important thing here. It's kind of a human process. But Tara, I can imagine as well, we're talking about preparing people for interviews and what you do in terms of coaching, and between us coaches here, coach one-on-one to each other. Because we've got an interesting other dynamic here as well, because what you specialize is in English as a second language. I imagine as well this idea of this one-to-one conversation is very daunting for someone, especially if English is their second language. I mean, what's your initial thoughts on what we've talked about, Tara, with like your input as well?
Yeah, no, I like what Will was talking about in terms of preparing, and I think that's really important, particularly if it's a very emotional leaving as well. So what I try and get people to do is to think matter-of-factly about it, but in a diplomatic way. So prepare and also be sure that you're leaving for yourself as well. So when you're going into the conversation, like you were saying, entering in and saying, I've really enjoyed my time here, even if it has been challenging, or you just say some things that you appreciate, but I've been offered a new role and this is when I'm starting. So trying to be matter of fact and letting them know exactly what's happening, rather than getting caught in that emotional, that emotional roller coaster that can happen. Yeah. So, for example, a lot of the people will ask me that when I'm working with them, what do I say if they say, why didn't you tell me you were looking for jobs? Or you let that go and tell them exactly what's happening. And it was interesting listening to Will talking, because I was thinking about two of my own experiences when I've resigned from jobs. And one was really good, where I went in very prepared. I hadn't written my letter yet, but I said, okay, can I have a chat to my boss? And the conversation went really well. I said, I've found a job here. This is when I'm starting. I made sure that before I went in, I knew how long I had to give notice for. And that was all good. And the relationship was quite good when I was leaving. But then I had another job where I was so afraid to say something and say, oh, can we have a chat first, that I remember sending an email overnight and then not being able to sleep, knowing that I would see this person the next day. And it actually hurt the relationship, because I got along really well with this person, and they were disappointed that I couldn't just go up to them and say, hey, this is what's happening. So I think you can have the best intention, or you can be trying to avoid the inevitable, but it's better to be upfront, say what you need to say. But yeah, going back to helping people that I help, it's about trying to get them saying the bare minimum of what they need to say, and not sort of getting into that emotional backwards and forwards, and because it can be quite traumatic sometimes, It's not ideal for the employee, and not ideal for the employer as well. So
yeah, I've been on the two ends of the coin, because I used to run my own recruitment practice, and then once I had Alicia, who I get along really well with, even now, she at the time handed in a notice, and I was the same thing. I had the opposite thing of being the employer, being like, "What? Where are you going? Oh no, this is a nightmare." And so I've been on two sides of the coin, and you learn. So as someone who's hiring now, I think it helps being in recruitment as well, because none of this is ever personal. It is professional, and we all have our own agendas. And the thing is, sometimes you can be looking for opportunities, and sometimes things just fall in your lap. Literally, opportunities come, and you have those conversations, and one thing leads to another, and this is life, and it's a balance. So you want to be, I think the best thing is to do is be straightforward and professional. And I think it really helps, as well as if you've raised one or two things in the past, then you can lightly touch upon them when you're leaving, without it being like this, oh you did this and that, because actually at that point it's irrelevant anyways. But in an exit interview you can discuss some constructive criticism, but in my opinion it's probably best to leave out as much emotion as possible. And I think important things as well, it depends. Maybe if you're in a practice where you're doing something, it's probably good to know that you're not setting up a competing practice or something like that. So when I left McDonald's, we had a really frank, open conversation, and they were really, really good about it as well. Sorry, Will, but we're still here now, isn't it? So we're all together in the grand schemes. So, Will, we have your list here, and you tell me when you want to bring that up. I just noticed this one question popped up, which is really interesting, from Stephen Shaw, which asked, and this is a tricky one: if asked where you're going, should you tell a company? And so I actually had this pop up as a question on Monday when I was doing career coaching. There you go, Tara. I'm a coach. You're a coach. Get in contact with me if you're interested. Tara does coaching as well, and Will is a fantastic person who can help you. But this question popped up, so let's get back to the question. So Stephen says, should you tell your employer where you're going? Right. Two things. I think that it will always get out eventually. This is my personal opinion. It'll pop up on LinkedIn. People will find out. It's probably good to let them know where you're going, but you don't need to. I think it's good to let them know where you're going. You don't need to go into it any further than that, though. As in, you don't need to talk about the role, really. You don't need to give away details. You don't need to go into it too much. And the thing you got to be really careful about that as well is because, again, that can make it a little bit more personal. If you say like, oh, I'm leaving Will Ridgway Associates to Stephen Drew Associates because they're much better with quality of life and stuff. Oh gosh, you do not want to go into that conversation. And you don't really know yet because you haven't left. So it's better just to say, I'm going to here because this opportunity has come up and it's something that I want to pursue. And I thought about it, and it is something that I feel I would regret if I didn't pursue it. No one can argue with that, and it's the truth. But you can't say, I know it's going to be 10 times better, because that's wrong. And also, again, just to loop it around, I think transparency is always better. So, Stephen, I would encourage people to be honest about where they're going. If you don't feel comfortable about it, or maybe if the employer said, look, you're going to be working for MI5 or something, so don't say, then you can say it's been confidential. But at the same time, architecture industry, we're generally quite relaxed about it. It's fine to go to other places. And sometimes it can really diffuse the scenario. So, for instance, when I was leaving, I was just open and honest about where I was going to, my role at Ackroyd Lowry, and McDonald was supportive about it. I didn't go like, I can't tell you for a month, and then everyone's like, what is this guy up to? Or like, who does he think it is? I think sometimes it is better to just be open and honest and transparent. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on that right now. I can see that we've got a question from Jordan. I'm going to bring it up. Oh, Stephen says thank you. No problem, Steve. But oh yeah, what do you guys think about that before we move on? Do you think that it's okay to let the company know where you're going? Tara, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's important. Like, as you say, people are going to find out anyway.
Yeah.
I'm often asked, should I tell them why I'm leaving as the first question? And as you say, I don't think you necessarily need to say that up front. You just be honest and say, I'm pursuing another opportunity somewhere else. I think it'll be good for my career. Try and see it as a positive rather than, saying all the negative things about where you're leaving from. So
yeah, and the bit I like to touch on, and it's true as well, because a lot of the roles that you've done, and including your current role, are really important in your career path. So it's really important to acknowledge that you've enjoyed it there. Hopefully that is true, because like with me, I enjoyed it. But it's also that you learn something from it, and that so that you're grateful because it got you to the next step. But where you're at in your juncture, you have to go that next step. Will, how do you feel about revealing where you're going? Do you think it's the right thing to do?
Yeah, I think I think it can definitely help with the whole situation. I mean, obviously it depends. If you're going to somewhere like if you're going to go to a rival place, you probably should let them know anyway, because otherwise, if you're secretive about it, eventually, like you said, it will catch on, and it could look like you are. They wouldn't be able to trust you necessarily to work out your notice, for example. So it's probably best to be honest. But again, you don't have to justify why you're leaving. You don't have to justify to them. You already know why you're leaving. You've spoken to any significant others that matter to you as well why you're leaving. You don't need to justify to your boss why, and that's important, because again, they could try and put pressure on you, and that can lead to them trying to promise to make things different, which we can obviously talk about later, like counteroffers, things like that. So it's important just to be quite frank with them. And I like what you said, Steve, about saying that, I wouldn't have been presented this new opportunity had it not been for the opportunity that you have provided me working here. And so you can almost turn it into a positive for them and just say, I really appreciate all the help you've done. And then you can say, well, I'll do my best to try and help with the handover of work so that it's as smooth as possible for you. So I agree with both what you and Tara said.
I think you're right, and I think it's important as well to be really thankful for what you've done, and also remember that you've hopefully worked hard as well. So like you feel like I've tried really hard here and I've absolutely enjoyed it, and hopefully you feel that same way, and we can both leave on the best of terms, and that's the kind of tone you want to do. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, guys, if you fancy it, is I'm going to get up Jordan's question, and then after that, maybe we can get up McDonald and Company's professional opinion on how to go about it. When then we can, and then I think that shows the kind of recruitment company you guys are great with this kind of stuff as well, and we'll go through that. Yep. Cool. Jordan says, if you have good experience with an employer, make sure to write a thank you letter of resignation. Also, make the person who gave you the chance to know you'll always remember them for their good deeds. Nice one, Jordan. Should have been on here as well, but we got your message, so that's cool. They may well be your reference in future. Yeah, ding dong. Good point. You may be leaving due to an opportunity in a lifetime, as mentioned. Fantastic. All right, great. Love that. So that was more of an opinion piece. So Jordan, I'll bring you up again. There we go. Jordan, if you ever I've seen your project for when you were reviewing it in your part 2. It looked good. I'm sure you're going to do very well. But if it all went Pete Tonga, you want to go something different, I'm sure you'd have a good career in recruitment. Great. So let me see this. Laura's got an interesting question. I haven't fully read this, but we'll bring it up and we'll do it together, and then we'll go into your list. Will not leaving the company, Laura says, but how would you deal with the situation where you've worked with a friend on a design project, you've done all the work, and they're now starting a business using your work on their website? Wow, Laura, that is such a specific question. And I think that a little bit in this, to me, that's a bad leaver. So this is a good example of how you should not leave a company. The last thing you want to do is hijack all the images and go elsewhere. So, I can't comment from a legal standpoint. I think the best thing to do is to speak to this person. But if for instance we're talking about intellectual property, that is a whole different ballpark of not a good situation. So leaving anywhere, trust me, I've seen it all. I've seen it in recruitment. I've seen it in architecture. I've seen people that download the R drive. I've seen people that go, oh, well, maybe this stuff will be useful. It is totally not worth it. You can get yourself into a lot of trouble, and it's really unethical. So I think that basically, if I was an employer, or if I was like yourself in this scenario, and a friend took your design work and put it on their website, I would probably seek a lawyer because you can't. That's not fair in life. I think that it's fine to give people kudos, and like here, what I love is having everyone on the show here. But this is the Architecture Social Show with Will Ridgway at McDonald Company, with Tara Cull at Archie English, and we all contribute and all credited. I wouldn't relabel this whole thing and just gut people out, and that's the kind of thing that's not good. So I'm actually amazed that this person would do it, because to me this is the opposite of everything we talked about. The whole thing of where we're going with this is, when you're leaving resignation, it's really difficult conversation, but you want to keep having that good relationship in the future. And in my opinion, how not to do a resignation is to say you're leaving or not contact someone and then steal all the files is an absolute awful way to do it. So, Will, I think we have the award for the worst way to leave a business and resign is to steal all the info and not tell them you're ever going. Do not do that. That is awful. Sorry to hear about that, Laura. I would seek legal advice immediately if someone had stolen the stuff, or I would say that, I would try and contact them and say, like, look, if you're going to keep doing this, that I would probably speak a lawyer. Again, though, this is just my opinion. It's an opinion piece, and so this is a suggestion, as you've asked. This area that you're going into, without knowing the specifics, you definitely want to get a lawyer. Tara, are you feeling like Judge Judy, or do you think that I give good advice there? Seek a legal advisor. I think
that's very important. And actually, I had not a similar situation, but I used to work as a freelancer with somebody who I did some design work with. And so we shared projects. And so I just made sure that I contacted the person. I said, this is the project we worked on. I'm going to put it on my website. I will say that we worked on it together and put a link to your website. So I think maybe she could approach the person and say, hey, I've noticed that you've done this. Do you know what the implications of that are? Could you at least put our name against the project, or say that you're going to seek legal advice?
It's crazy, isn't it? And also, it's probably worth knowing that, I mean, we won't go off tangent too much, but I think it's important in life that you get everything in writing and you agree things. And it's like, Tara, we've released a course. We know we pre-agree what we're going to do before. And when it's promoted, it's like our course, that's it. And if there's ever a disagreement in the future, then we have that conversation, and you speak like human beings and say, well, you're going to change it.
Yeah.
I don't remove your logo and be like, do.
I did it all.
Yeah, me. No, I think that's just like the opposite of the ethos of this. Is like, you want to basically keep people on your side and develop those relationships. And a good example of doing it the right way is that at EPR, when I left, now they were one of my biggest clients in architectural recruitment, and that's no secret because I work there well. I work with them a lot, and basically that was because that we ended on good terms. I didn't go like, see you laters, and actually we basically built up a relationship from there, which went really well. So you
I think
want to
there's an example too that I sometimes see similar to this, in that when you're doing your portfolio, for example, and you're showing people your work, you've got, if it's not your image, you've got to make sure that you acknowledge who did the image, because I can see this sometimes as well. So yeah, I think it's really important that you acknowledge who does the work.
Yeah, I agree. Acknowledge everything. And that's, again, with the theme of resignation, you want to be thankful to people. You want to acknowledge them. You want to acknowledge when companies have had a positive impact on them. And you want to be clear with what you're doing. So if you're resigning to do your own business, you should probably have that conversation of like, what can you show? What can't you show? Have that conversation in it. Maybe not in the immediate thing, but in that month where you're leaving, you should talk about it then. So Laura, look, I'm sure you'll be able to handle it well. That's our thoughts on it as well. And look, if you hopefully let us know how you get on, but you can message me, Tara, or Will at some point, and hopefully.
Yeah, I hope it's resolved. That's a difficult.
Yeah, hope it goes well. And Jordan agrees that he thinks that that scenario of like saying one thing and when you leave is basically could be as fraud. So moving on. Okay, so we're gonna talk. That was a really interesting side avenue we went down, because actually it highlights how not to do it, and all the situations and complications that comes up when you don't leave on a good note, because handing in your notice shows what you're doing. It states your intentions. It states that you're going to go, and then in that month you've got to be as professional as possible, and afterwards you've got to be as professional as possible during the thing, because it's really, really important. So Will Ridgway, okay, do you want to bring up your fantastic list now, my friend? Is this the time?
Yes, I do.
Okay, cool. All right, I'll bring it up now. Ooh, maybe need to zoom in slightly, just because of the because this is broadcasted at 720p.
Right, how far zoomed in? Can you see that?
Yeah, maybe one more, mate. Just one more.
Right. So first of all,
good.
It's 3 pages long, but I'll share it on my LinkedIn after as well if anyone actually wants to view the document themselves. But basically, It's 3 pages that McDonald and Company have put together to basically give an overview of how to go about handing in resignation. And it's covered already a lot of points that we've talked about, where, I mean, as you can see straight away, about keeping resignation short, simple, and positive. It's important to have that positive spin. But what I like a lot about them, and I try not to make it too jarring when moving this.
Yeah, that's cool.
They've got they talk about exactly what to talk about in the oral resignation. So when you're meeting in person to speak of them, and then also what I like as well. And again, I'm just going to scroll through quickly because I think it's giving you examples of how to talk. So, for example, on the left, in the quotation marks, it gives you basically a template to use when you're actually in the meeting with your boss, which is really helpful. And then on the right, we've actually got a written template of what you'd write if you're doing a formal letter as well, which you would do, you'd follow up after. And I think that's really good, because I think sometimes people are not sure how to word, word it in person or even as a letter, not sure how to do it. And it's a nice template there where you say, I want to thank you for all you've done for me here at so-and-so. It's been a pleasure working with you and representing the company as your architect, for example. So it's a really basic one. And of course you can move away from the template, but it's there for someone if they've never had a resignation in before, they don't really know what you should be saying. This is a clear outline of how you would go about it. And then in addition to, obviously, those templates, it talks in detail about how to compose yourself, what questions to answer and which questions to avoid. And then also it has a nice bit at the end as well about counter offers as well, which is
this is important. Yeah,
Yes.
Will, do you want to run us through a little bit about counter offers then, and I can add, and Tara can add as well.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, first of all, this you've got to remember why you're leaving. You know, there's a reason why you're leaving, whether that's the location, maybe it's money related, or maybe it's because you've been doing the same job for, you know, years. You've not been able to get a promotion because the company haven't been able to offer that, and you can find yourself advancing somewhere else by leaving your current company. So you've got to remember why you're leaving in the first place. And generally, sometimes companies, if they are, you know, if you're quite valuable to them, they'll make counter offers, whether that's salary. Generally, it's salary because money always talks. But generally, it's salary. But sometimes they might offer other things. So, for example, oh, you know, you can do this from now onwards. We'll give you a promotion, for example. And it's important not to get sucked in to these counter offers. Generally, you know, most people who accept counter offers are not in that job 12 months later, you know, and it's important as well, because if you accept a counter offer, then you completely ruin the relationship you had with the company you were initially going to join. And that makes it very difficult in the future, say after, you know, say within that 12 months to then try and go with them. You have to find something else. And particularly if it's a small industry, sometimes you know, it can affect your chances of finding a job later. So generally, you should always shun a counter offer, and particularly as well if they're just giving you money. You know, money's great, but at the end of the day, if you're not happy because you're having to relocate, you're having to commute across the other side of London every day, then effectively that's going to wear you down, and you're just going to have to look for another job anyway. So it's always important to remember why you're leaving, and to basically always reject a counter offer. I mean, obviously there are certain circumstances, and you have to think about it yourself of why you should accept a counter offer, but you also got to remember why you're leaving, how this new company is going to help promote you and develop your career, and also the benefits you get from this new company as well. So generally, I would avoid counter offers, but I don't know, what's your thoughts on all this as well?
Yeah, I think generally, though, the science backs up what you're saying, because I think it was something like there was an article that came out, wasn't it, where like 80% of people who accept a counter offer leave in 6 months. So I think it's good to always listen, but you've got to be careful with the employer, because if you're sure that you definitely don't want to stay, it's probably best not to entertain a counter offer to begin with, because then you're going to get your employer's hopes up that maybe you can stay, and then they spend a lot of energy, Will and Tara, preparing this counter offer, and you go like, nah. So that could be like a way to sour the relationship. But you're right. I think like it's quite an easy fix sometimes to throw money at a problem. Like, no, don't leave, Will. Have 5 grand more, and that is great because it affects your livelihood. But where the problems come in is that maybe you were going to have a promotion in salary at this other job anyways, but usually one of the reasons you're leaving, right, is that it's salary, but it's tangled with this feeling. Maybe it's a lack of progression, it's lack of this, lack of that. And you're right. Now, because you're having this miracle conversation, does everything get honored? It's a really good question. I mean, Tara, do you have any thoughts on counter offers and that scenarios?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's really important not to get involved in the politics of moving on, because you need some space as well to be able to move on to your next role. So it takes a lot of energy to find a job and then have to move on to another job. So you've got to save your energy so that when you're starting in this new job, you're starting afresh. So I would say you've got to know exactly what Will was saying. Why are you leaving in the first place? Stick to it. Don't get involved in the politics, so that you can be really ready to move on in your new role and start with a lot of energy.
Yeah. Well said. I think well said from all. Generally, if you're leaving, it's probably for a reason. And counter offer, look, I'm never saying never, but this information that you've got, Will, is based on statistically what happens. And what I can say anecdotally, because I don't have the stats in front of me, but typically people who accepted a counter offer would approach us again when I worked in recruitment and say things haven't been solved. And another risk with that is then you lose the job you go into. And as Will said at the start, you lose that relationship then, because that company is like, Are you going to mess us around again? Maybe, probably not. And it can be very hard to get that conversation going again. And I like what you said, Tara, about actually handing your notice in is emotionally exhaustive, and engaging in counter offers. It is really intense because you're now balancing your current employer, which you said you were leaving, and now they've got a counter offer, and then your other company, they think you're going. So it can be this whole like minefield of exhaustion, and you have to think about really if you want to go down that. So this is great. Well, this is a great document. You said you're going to have it on your LinkedIn afterward. That's cool.
Yeah, I'll see if I can attach it to my profile after.
Yeah, it's probably worth mentioning if anyone's in these kind of scenarios, we all offer help in different ways as well. So while I work at Accra Lowry as head of talent, I'm working on a few roles for that. Outside of those hours, I do career coaching. You can talk to me about that. Will works on the architecture team at McDonald Company. There's a lot of roles on right now. And if you're in a tricky situation, you can also contact Will. He can let you know what's there. And Tara has a lot of experience with this herself, and she has a specialism with second language, which I think really helps. Because imagine if English is your second language and you've got all this going on, it's just like another compounded like add-on to the stress pit that's already there.
Well, another thing that I do think about too is when somebody does eventually move on to their new role, sometimes they need a bit of reminding why they left, or yes, you have made the right decision. It's going to be okay, sort of thing. So yeah, there can be that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, I think it is important to remind yourself, and I think that's why the synergy between what you're saying there, Tara, and what Will said is that I think when the counter offers come, especially, is when you need to remind yourself why you want to go, and you can talk about these a little bit diplomatically, to the employer. If the counter offer comes, you can be like, I really respect that you're trying, and look, that's great that you've offered me an increase of salary. The thing is, though, that this role is just something that in my career I feel passionate about and I would regret pursuing. So the salary is not going to change my decision in this part, but I really appreciate you trying. And the other thing is, you could say, I'm thinking out loud, is you could be like, I really appreciate that you're doing all this, you're spending the energy to help, and it shows how much you care, and I appreciate that. But you have to understand that my decision here is final, or I do not think that these things are going to change it. Because then you can kind of cut the conversation dead. Because it reminds me a bit like, it's something like, when you go separate ways with someone, and it's a difficult process, but you gotta hit it dead on, because you can't say to someone like, yeah, I think we're gonna break up, but maybe we can maybe we can try this or that. Like, no, if you're leaving, you're leaving, and you gotta make it clear, and you gotta say like, babes, it's not gonna make a difference if you do this and that. Because it's not fair, is it, to play with people's emotions?
Yeah, it's not you, it's me. And moving on.
Yeah, it is definitely me, because I'm pursuing my career in this direction, but I thank you for what you've done. So you're fine.
Yeah.
It is not you, and it is me. I love that. So Stephen offers a suggestion. I've seen staff who won't look into leave and they've been approached. At the end of the day, they have stayed with us and been you for years. Exactly, Stephen. I think that's a really mature approach from an employer. And for that, you will get a clap. That's the best way to look at it, isn't it? Because it isn't personal. It isn't personal. And sometimes as well, it can be situation, isn't it? It can be a new job. Suddenly the location's for someone. Or imagine like, Tara, you have a family, or I have a family in the future. And suddenly I'm like, well, my situation's changed. I now have kids. So this new job is much more desirable because I can pick them up and have them screaming in the background because I couldn't do that. And so that's not the employer's fault. That's a change of scenario. And in life, there are changes of scenarios. And this is something that you can talk about when you're leaving, because that can diffuse the whole scenario. You go, I'm leaving for this, that. I'm really passionate about this role. And as you know, my personal circumstances have changed. And, I enjoy working here, but just going forwards, this is probably going to suit my lifestyle a little bit better. I've got to pick the kids up at 5:00. They got to be picked up, and I think that's a really good way of grounding the conversation as well. But Will, all right, that's awesome. I mean, should we summarize together, guys? So what have we covered here? We've covered that at the start, you probably should. You definitely need to flag down your line manager, because you're working directly with them, that you need to have a conversation. I think it's better than doing it on email. It should be in person. The second thing we covered, Will, was the conversation, generally the ins and outs of how to go around it. Speaking directly, professionally, trying not to waffle, but it's emotional. So the key word here is trying not to waffle, and explain why you were leaving. You don't need to say overly much about the role in the future, but you need to make it clear why you're leaving, when you're leaving, and it's worth saying, in my opinion, where you're going to, and you don't need to expand much more on that. And I think that helping out the company in the month before you're leaving is really important, because you want to keep a good relationship with them. We also covered that you don't want to download all the files. Well, I'm going to click this off here just so you can bring
that's
up.
fine.
So we covered that you should leave on good terms. You shouldn't be tempted to take stuff. You shouldn't worry about that. And then we talked about the document, which Will have, and you can message him. He can talk to you about it as well. And from that, then we freestyle just now about talking about counteroffers. So unless you two think that there's anything in particular we mentioned, I think that was a good roundup.
That was very good.
Yeah.
I would add one thing.
Please.
Is like, I think it was Jordan who was talking about if the experience has been good, to say thank you. I think it's also a good habit to, even if the experience hasn't been what you expected, is to try and draw a positive from something. So it gets you in a good habit of moving on to your next role and seeing what have you taken from that role now that you can take through to your next role. So even if it hasn't been the best, you just take one positive from it.
I agree. And I think, though, as well, in life, it generally helps to be more positive than negative. It's going to look better. It's going to be better on you when you're leaving. You don't need to flesh out all the stuff as well in that thing. Because it's gone. You've decided you're going. You're letting them know. So now it's all about, you can say a little bit about where you're going to and a little bit about why. But as Tara said, I think you just say why you're leaving doesn't need to be Will, because you were da. It can be, why can be about your current situation, where you're going to, and you've really enjoyed everything you've learned. But this opportunity is just something that you have to do, and that's a good why, and that's a professional why. And then you say when, and then you say how. I'm going to be the best leaver I possibly can, and I'm not going to steal anything from the R drive. And I think that's I think that really works, because I love the who, what, where, when, why, and I think that you can apply it to most scenarios. And I think that actually, if you remind yourself of that, then actually handing your notice in doesn't need to be as stressful as possible. Will, did I miss anything out there at all? I think that's
very succinct. I can't say the word. I think that's very. Yes, I think that's very good.
Don't worry, I can't say it either.
Succinct. Succinct.
Succinct.
I can't say it either. My gosh.
We can't say it. What a difficult word, isn't it?
But
we all have different accents too, which is even better.
We do.
Yes.
We have. Well, Tara, you're a hybrid, because I always forget that you're in. Well, you're not in Cape Hardy, are you? But you're in France.
I'm in France, but.
We're a bunch of globetrotters. I moved from Wales to England, very tropical, very, very far global move down the M4 motorway. Great. So on that point, so we talked about where we are. So how can people find us and what we're going to do? So Will Ridgway, how can people find you and how can you help them right now? And that would be great to hear.
Yep, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn under Will Ridgway. I'm very easy to find. And additionally as well, you can even go to the McDonald and Company website, mcdonaldandcompany.com, I think.
Great.
And I'm there as well. As if you search my name, you can find me, you can reach out to me. My contact details are there as well.
Amazing. I love what you do. We'll always keep in touch. Really value all you've learned. You were great to work with before. Therefore, I trust you. Amazing, Will. Thank you so much. Tara, if do you want to let people know what they can get in touch with you about and where to find you?
Yeah, so if they need help with obviously preparing for job interviews or leaving their current job or working when they're working in an office, if they need some help, they can get in contact. So on LinkedIn is usually where people can find me. So just my name, or you can go to my website, which is www.archyenglish, as you can see on the screen.com.
Brilliant, amazing. And also Tara offers, me and Tara are doing our course in the Architecture Social. You can find us both there. Tara's a really nice active community, so that might be a really nice way to meet Tara. I'll be knocking around there, but you can ask her in the community questions as well. And you can find me and Tara on the architecturesocial.com. And you can find Will there. And
Yes, I'm there.
And Will's there. And Will, you'll have to post some of the jobs you're working on now because before I would do it because it was us together, but you're full carte blanche, my friend, to add the jobs there. So Will be in the Architecture Social, and but Will has been a little bit busier now. We'll get you to say something soon, Will, isn't it? You'll write a job. Next time you got a new job, you'll put it there.
I will.
Great. Yeah, and so Tara's there, and I'm there as well. And just to remind everyone, so I have left McDonald Company. I absolutely think they're great, and you can contact Will for all of that recruitment consultancy on that. So I work now as head of talent at ArchAdemia. We are growing at the moment, and currently I am looking for an associate and an interior designer. It's a super cool, fun practice. I will do another thing where I talk about them in full detail another time. But ArchAdemia, I just joined them this week. I was in the office yesterday. Super cool, all safe. I had my test. I put the swab up my nose, Will, before I went in. Oh my gosh, that was that. So I literally got in and I had the swab, and they were all really nice and give me my 2 meters, and then it looked like I was crying. So they probably like, who's this guy on the first day? I was like, but it's just because you put something up your nose, it feels really strange. So it was super fun to be in the office yesterday. You can contact me about ArchAdemia. And one last thing that I'm going to say is that I love working at ArchAdemia. One of the reasons I did it, though, is because I now do career coaching. So like Tara, we both have different slants and things, but that's what it's all about. I do career coaching one-on-one as well. So you can see all my videos from before. And if you want time with me outside of when I'm working with ArchAdemia, we can do career coaching. So you can find out all the details on architecturesocial.com/coaching. There you go. All right, everyone. That's where we all are. That's what we're up to. Nora says, best of luck. Oh, my gosh. Thank you so much. And Jordan, you are both legends. Do I have like a legend button? Here we go. So you two are legends. Thank you.
Is that from Zelda?
Yeah, I've got my gaming soundboards. I'll play 1 or 2 for you. That's bad. Like, that's like if handing you is stealing the files on the hard drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, bad. I don't know what that one is. Let's do one more before we go. Oh, look at this. This one's the big castle. Castle on the hill. There you go. Got to have a bit of a soundboard, isn't it? Never forget your origins. This soundboard certainly has done really well. I'm going to get more sounds. We will be back next time. We will, if we think of some relevant subjects, we will come back and do videos. If you have any suggestions for us what to do, let us know. Thank you so much. I've been Stephen Drew. We've got Will Ridgway and Tara. We'll see you next time. Take care,
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.